My name is Olivia Carter, and until 2 years ago, I thought the worst mistake of my life was marrying my ex-husband. I had no idea the real mistake belonged to someone else. Someone who had been lying to me for 34 years. It started with a Christmas gift. My best friend Megan handed me a small box during our annual holiday dinner. Inside was a home DNA testing kit. I laughed. "You're basically giving me homework." She rolled her eyes. "Just do it. Everyone's doing those things now." At first, I wasn't interested. My family history wasn't exactly exciting. My parents had been married for decades. I grew up in a quiet town in Ohio. No mysteries. No scandals. No dramatic secrets. At least that's what I believed. A few weeks later, I finally mailed the sample. Then I forgot about it. Life moved on. Work remained stressful. My divorce was still fresh. And honestly, the DNA test was the last thing on my mind. Then one Tuesday morning, I received an email. "Your results are ready." I opened the app during my lunch break. That single decision changed everything. The ethnicity results were boring. Nothing surprising. Mostly British and Irish ancestry. Exactly what I expected. Then I clicked the family matches section and froze. At the top of the list was a name I recognized immediately. Jason Miller. My ex-husband. At first I laughed. Obviously the system made a mistake. Then I looked closer. Shared DNA, 24.8%. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a distant relative. That wasn't a coincidence. That percentage meant one thing. Close family. Very close family. I stared at the screen for almost 10 minutes, unable to process what I was seeing. Because Jason wasn't just my ex-husband. He was the man I'd spent 7 years married to. The man I thought I knew better than anyone. The man I divorced 18 months earlier. And according to the DNA results, we were related. I immediately called customer support. Surely there had been an error. There wasn't. The representative explained that the match was genuine. The percentage suggested a half-sibling, aunt, uncle, nephew, or grandparent relationship. I felt sick. None of it made sense. Jason and I met in college. Our families never knew each other. We grew up in different states, different schools, different lives. How could we possibly be related? That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I called Jason. We hadn't spoken in months. When he answered, he sounded surprised. "Olivia, did you ever take one of those DNA tests?" Long silence. Then, "Actually, yeah." My heart pounded. And another silence. Longer this time. Then he said something that terrified me. "Olivia, I was wondering when you'd call." Every muscle in my body went rigid. What does that mean? Jason exhaled heavily. Because I got the same result. The room spun. I sat down immediately. What result? His answer changed everything. The one saying we're family. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I whispered, "This can't be real." "I know, but it is." The next few weeks became a nightmare. We ordered additional tests. Different companies. Different laboratories. Different databases. Every result came back the same. There was no mistake. No software glitch. No mix-up. Jason and I shared enough DNA to be half-siblings. Half-siblings. The word felt impossible. Disgusting. Terrifying. I wanted answers. And there was only one person who could give them. My mother. The moment I showed her the reports, the color disappeared from her face. She didn't ask questions. She didn't demand proof. She didn't accuse the companies of making errors. Instead, she started crying. That's when I knew. She already knew the truth. And whatever she was hiding was far worse than anything I had imagined. "Mom," I whispered. "What aren't you telling me?" She looked at the DNA report, then at me, then back at the report, and quietly said 7 words that shattered my entire world. "I prayed you'd never find out." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My mother's words echoed inside my head. "I prayed you'd never find out." Not. "The test is wrong." Not. "There must be some mistake." Not even. Let me explain. Just 7 words. 7 words that told me everything and nothing at the same time. I slowly lowered the DNA report onto the kitchen table. My hands were shaking. My mother sat across from me crying quietly, 34 years old. And suddenly I felt like a child again. A child who had just discovered her entire life might be a lie. Tell me the truth. My voice barely sounded like my own. My mother covered her face. For a moment, I thought she might refuse. Then she looked up and finally began talking. The story started 35 years earlier, long before I was born, long before she met the man I believed was my father. Back then, she had been engaged to another man, a man named Richard. According to my mother, Richard was charming, confident, successful, the kind of man everyone liked immediately, including her. They planned a future together, talked about marriage, talked about children, talked about growing old together. Then one day Richard disappeared. No warning, no explanation, no goodbye, just gone. My mother spent months trying to find him, calling friends, calling relatives, searching everywhere. Nothing. Then she discovered she was pregnant. With me. The room felt colder with every sentence. I already knew where this was heading, but I didn't want to believe it. My mother continued. Heartbroken and alone, she eventually met the man who raised me. The man I called Dad. The man who loved me as his own daughter. The man who never knew the truth. He married her, raised me, protected me, and became the father I needed. But Richard had vanished completely, or so she thought. Years later, she learned something horrifying. Richard had another child, a son born only months before I was born. A son he never told her about. That son was Jason, my ex-husband. I felt physically sick. The room spun. I stood up and paced across the kitchen. No. The word escaped automatically. No. Because if what she was saying was true, then Jason and I shared the same biological father. Half-brother, half-sister. The DNA results suddenly made perfect sense. And that made them even worse. My mother looked broken. I wanted to tell you. I laughed. A harsh, bitter laugh. When? Silence. Before the wedding? Silence. Before the divorce? Silence. Before 7 years of marriage? Tears streamed down her face. But I couldn't comfort her. Not then. Not after what I'd learned. For days, I couldn't think about anything else. Jason felt the same way. We spoke several times. Not as ex-spouses. Not even as friends. Just two people trying to understand a nightmare neither of us created. Then something happened that changed everything. Jason hired a private investigator. At first, I thought he wanted closure. Instead, he uncovered something much bigger. Something my mother never knew. And something Richard spent decades hiding. The investigator located Richard. Alive. Living under a different name. 3 states away. When Jason told me, I nearly dropped my phone. He's alive? Yes. And he's known about us. Silence. Then Jason answered. Apparently, he's known the entire time. My stomach dropped. The entire time. Not some of the time. Not recently. The entire time. The investigator discovered records. Letters. Financial documents. Even old correspondence. Richard had known he had 2 children. Me. And Jason. He knew where we lived. He knew our names. He even knew when we got married. The realization hit me like a truck. He knew. He knew. And he said nothing. Not when we started dating. Not when we got engaged. Not when we got married. Nothing. For 7 years. I felt rage unlike anything I'd experienced before. Not sadness. Not heartbreak. Rage. Because this wasn't an accident anymore. This was a choice. A deliberate choice. A selfish choice. A cowardly choice. A few months later, Jason and I agreed to meet Richard together. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to spend the rest of my life pretending he didn't exist. But I needed answers. We met at a small office building. Richard looked older than I expected. Smaller too. For years I'd imagined him as some powerful figure. Instead, he looked like an ordinary man. A frightened old man. The moment he saw us together, he started crying. Neither of us did, because we had already spent months grieving. He began apologizing immediately. Excuses followed. Fear, shame, regret. The usual words people use when consequences finally arrive. Then I asked one question. The only question that mattered. Why didn't you tell us? His answer destroyed any sympathy I had left. Because it wasn't complicated. It wasn't noble. It wasn't tragic. It was selfish. He was afraid. Afraid his wife would leave. Afraid his reputation would suffer. Afraid people would judge him. So he chose silence. And that silence nearly ruined 2 lives. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Not with reconciliation. Not with forgiveness. Just truth. Finally, the strange thing about truth is that it doesn't always heal you immediately. Sometimes it hurts first. A lot. But eventually it gives you something lies never can. Freedom. Today, people often ask how I survived discovering a secret that massive. The answer is simple. I stopped carrying responsibility for choices that weren't mine. Jason and I didn't create the lie. My mother didn't create the lie. The man responsible was the man who chose silence every single day for more than 3 decades. As for my father, the man who raised me, he remains my real father. Not because of DNA. Because of love. Because he showed up. Because he stayed. And because being a father has never been about genetics. It's about the people who choose you. Looking back now, I no longer see that DNA test as the day my life fell apart. I see it as the day the truth finally caught up with a lie that had been running for 34 years. And trust me, some truths take a long time to arrive. But eventually they always do.